Hi everyone, it's Laura here, and in today's video I'm going to share with you 3 different ways in which you can use your white pigment ink, and I'm also going to share how to create a cute slimline scene using products by LDRS Creative. Let's have a quick look at the products that I'll be using today. We have the Boardwalk My Stamp Set, the Slimline Scallop dies. I was so excited when this came out. I'm going to use the With All My Heart stencil to create a subtle pattern on my scene. And then for my sentiment, I'm going to use the Love You die, and I'm going to combine it with one of the greetings in the Anytime Stack stamp set. This set coordinates with the sentiment stack dies, and they can be used together to create lots of different sentiment banners all at once, and I will show you how later on. For the background of my scene, I used 4 different colors of LDRS Creative hybrid inks. We have Teacoat Pink, Soft Kisses, Tangerine Dream and Banana Cream Pie. That is the ink that I'm blending right now on this panel of Bristol Smooth cardstock that I die cut with the rectangle die in the Scallop Slimline die set. I then moved on and added Tangerine Dream as my next shade, and I'm going to have sort of a gradient starting from yellow and ending with the Teacoat Pink at the top, which is a nice and hot pink. I'm applying my inks using some domed ink blenders, and I am trying to achieve a nice and smooth blend between colors, and for that reason I'm going back and forth in the transition areas until I create that nice and really smooth gradient. The last color, as I mentioned, is my Teacoat Pink, and then I'm going to share with you the first way in which I'm going to use white pigment ink on this card today. The ink that I'm using is Snowy White pigment ink by LDRS Creative, and I'm going to blend it through a stencil to create a subtle pattern on this ink blended background. I'm using a foam ink blender to apply the ink through the stencil, which by the way is the With All My Heart stencil by LDRS Creative, but if you preferred, you could also use a brush, for example, or your preferred ink blending tool. I'm making sure that I have a nice impression of this cute pattern before moving the stencil down, aligning it with the parts that I have ink blended already so that I can continue the pattern all over this slimline die, and it will look like the stencil was the perfect size for the card. This was also very quick to do, and here is our background. I absolutely love this subtle detail that we added with the white pigment ink. The next way in which you can use your white ink is to use it for heat embossing. Here I'm going to do some heat embossing of my images with white embossing powder on white cardstock. So first of all, you will not see very much until I start coloring, and second, this doesn't take fully advantage of the convenience of using white pigment ink. If you were using it, for example, to heat emboss over black cardstock, then you would really see the difference, because in the areas where, for example, your embossing powder didn't stick too well, you still have the white pigment ink that shows through, and so it will look like your heat embossing is perfect. Because of how I created this card and what I wanted to show you, I wasn't able to do heat embossing with white pigment ink on black cardstock or dark colored cardstock, but I will show it in future videos anyway, so stay tuned for that too. Alright, once my embossing powder was melted, I could go ahead and start coloring the images, and today I decided to go for some water-based markers. I chose a color palette that would complete in a way the rainbow that I have on the background of my card. So there I have yellow, orange and pink, and for the images that I'm coloring now, instead I'm going to choose colors that are in the green, blue and purple families. So overall I will have a rainbow on my card, just the warmer part of it is going to be on the background and the cooler part of the rainbow will be on my images. The way in which I am coloring the images is by applying my markers in the areas that I think will be in shadow, and then I'm using a water brush loaded with clean water to blend them out and color the entire image. The fact that we are blending with water immediately creates more shades of this color and so allows us to create that nice gradient that adds dimension to the images. I'm going to now speed up the coloring process just a little bit, and I'm going to skip some parts just because I want to show you each color at least once, but I also don't want this video to be too long. And as I finish coloring these images, I just wanted to remind you that if you do enjoy this content and find it useful, you can support my channel by giving this video a thumbs up and leaving a comment in the comment section down below. Let me know what your favorite technique with white pigment ink is and how often you use it in your card making. If you are new to this channel, well, first of all, welcome, I hope you'll stick around, and if you find this content useful, you can subscribe to my channel and activate the notification bell to always be up to date with the release of new content. Alright, so at this point my images are all colored in and I can go ahead and die cut them with the coordinating dies. I'm securing the dies in place using some purple tape so that they won't shift as I run this through my die cutting machine. And one thing that I really love about LDRS dies, apart from the fact that they cut beautifully, is that they already come all cut apart, so you don't have to spend time separating them, which I find a very nice bonus. At this point, I started composing my scene and I figured out that I needed a few extra clouds, so I went ahead, I stamped them, colored them and die cut them off camera, and I did a little bit more die cutting, as you can see. This panel here is heavyweight white cardstock and I die cut it with the Scallop Slimline die, also by LDRS Creative. This will be the base of my card, because for this time I decided not to have a fold card, but to have more like a postcard type of format, if that makes sense. So I coated the back of this die cut using some strong double-sided adhesive, I peeled off the backing and then I adhered my sky background to the base. The pretty side, so to say, is face down in this case, so that when we turn the card around, the finished part of the white die cut will be the one that shows, and there we can write our personal message. I will show you that in a second. Here I'm just making sure that I have my corners nice and aligned before I can press my cardstock down and secure it to my card base. That's how the back of the card would look like. And then to decorate my scene, I also used the Scallop die in the Scallop Slimline die set to die cut some more white cardstock and create this lovely frame. This time around I'm using some liquid glue to adhere the frame in place. The die cut is rather thin, so I thought this was a little bit more convenient than going with some double-sided tape, and also, as usual, when I can, I use liquid adhesive because it gives me a little bit of time to position everything correctly while the glue is still wet. Next, I moved on and adhered the sentiment to the card before adhering all the scene elements, because I wanted to define where my greetings would go before basically creating the scene around them. I used the Love You die to die cut some white cardstock, and then I'm using the negative die cut as a guide to place down all the die cut letters. I'm using my reverse tweezers to pick up the letters and nest them inside my negative die cut, as this makes it much easier to handle these smaller die cuts. I'm doing this rather quickly because I don't want that liquid adhesive that is on the base of my card to accidentally glue down the negative die cut, because that would be a little bit of a disaster at this point. Once all the die cut letters are in place, I can carefully lift my guide, and because the glue is still a little bit wet, I still have a few seconds to move my letters around and make sure that they are positioned exactly as I want. The next part of the greeting also brings us to the third way in which you can use your white pigment ink, which is by stamping it on some dark cardstock. Here is some footage from the past because I created all these sentiment banners in one go and I'm using them on multiple cards. So I went back and dug out the footage where I created the sentiment banner for this card so that I could show it to you today as well. The stamp set is called Anytime Stack Sentiments and I am stamping it with white pigment ink by LDRS Creative on some black cardstock. This will allow me to create a sentiment banner for each of these lines basically, which is a separate greeting. And you can see that the white pigment ink performs quite well on this black cardstock. I found that if you use porous cardstock, the yield is much better and the white is much more vibrant because it's like the cardstock soaks in that pigment ink and you get a brighter result. Next, I'm going to die cut all the sentiments at once using the die that I'm showing on screen, and I'm basically going to align the 4 square openings in the die with the 4 little squares that were stamped along with the sentiments. Again, I'm securing the die with some purple tape and I'm running everything through my die cutting machine, and here is a bunch of sentiment banners that I can use on a lot of projects. I love that these are kind of all year round, all occasion type sentiments, so you can really use them on all kinds of cards. Alright, so back to the present, we can go ahead and glue down our sentiment banner to the front of the card. I decided to adhere it right under the Love You die cut, and then at this point I have defined the space in my scene and I can go ahead and fill it up by adhering the rest of the elements. I'm starting with the clouds, and again I'm using liquid glue and my reverse tweezers, and I'm trying to scatter the clouds here and there on my background to fill the available space, as I said. The last element that I'm going to adhere is the adorable little mouse that is flying on the balloon, and I'm going to have him hang over the frame a little bit because this creates a bit of extra interest in this scene. As a final touch, I decided to add a little bit of shimmer to this cute card, so I took my glitter brush pen and I used it to coat the clouds as well as of the balloon, and when you tilt the card against the light, this shines really nicely. It adds a lot of beautiful sparkle. Unfortunately, it's kind of hard to show on camera, but you have to trust me and try this out. And here is a close-up look at the card and the end of this tutorial in which I showed you 3 different ways to use your white pigment ink on your cards. If you did enjoy this video, make sure to give it a thumbs up and don't forget to let me know in the comments down below which is your favorite technique with white pigment ink. If you haven't already, you can subscribe to this channel for more card making and paper crafting inspiration. Thank you all so much for stopping by, stay safe and healthy, and have a great day!